Good morning, good afternoon, good evening.
Hi, everyone. I'm Clive.
Hey, Louis here.
This is Akush.
Welcome back to camp, where the only thing that you might get bitten by is poor information requirements. And this isn't your typical camp. There's no sleeping bags, no tents, no sing-along, and certainly no trust falls either. We've just got this healthy obsession for things like ISO 19650 and better information management and making sure that everyone's on the same digital page. We looked at defining actionable information requirements, starting the plan, defining a framework that you can actually hang these information requirements on. Get comfy, because we'll be going through the one thing that nobody actually reads, which is the contracting side of things, diving into how to hold people accountable without all of those endless email chains and frustration. Last, we looked at the planning and we saw the root of all evil. If you don't get that part right, everyone thinks they've done it until they haven't. We're going to be going through the contracting. It's the place where everyone hides all of the bodies. And if you didn't read page 147, you actually should have done. And then we'll be looking at the tracking. That's why project managers, they lose the will to live, kind of one spreadsheet at a time. We'll show you how that's tracked right the way through. And then we'll look at handover, and all of the while working in CDEs and making sure that when the client says, where are the as-built? You're not 20% panicking and 80% in denial. We'll be able to help with all of those questions. So this GIF really is the pinnacle of our industry's risk management strategy. You've got people that, as I said, on page 147 of the contract, you're supposed to have read something. And most of the time people think that they're distributing risk by burying it in the contract. But when you watch every single person on a project nervously grin and sort of say, yeah, I haven't read any of that, you kind of really get to the root cause of some of these challenges. And if you're sitting in the chair just about to be experimented on, I don't think that you really want to be in this position where you haven't understood exactly what you're on the hook for. So we're here to fix that root cause and make sure that it doesn't get buried in a contract, make sure that everyone understands exactly what's going on. If all of the responsibilities are fuzzy, if the requirements are vague, then we end up with lots of missed deadlines, a lot of blame. And these unstructured requirements are really problematic for teams. We see this because people say, I want LOD 500, or I want Kobe, full Kobe for me. And if we have no explanation of what that means and no context, then everyone's going to be heading in different directions. And the boldest goal for teams is going to be, I just want to get somewhere. And this is a classic case of requirements and not sharing the same destination. When we don't have the defined requirements and we don't have realistic goals, it's difficult to feel empowered as a team. You don't really feel like you can do anything. So you kind of feel in this situation where you're a little bit lost. So we're going to be talking about how to fix this hot mess of contracting and move from bloated and unreadable documents to a clear and structured and useful process. And the way we're going to do that is 3 steps. We like 3 steps here. The first step is assessing the risk. So no 200-page monsters, no more guessing about what's included. The second one is defining, instead of just a contract agreement, a collaborative agreement that actually does have an understanding and a collaboration to get there. And that's what the ISO 19650 workflow really structures. And then instead of having a one-size-fits-all approach, we'll look at how we can actually bring targeted contracts to everyone. So defining risks, understanding how we mobilize, appointing the right parties and bringing them into the fold and making sure that they can follow along, get the responsibility matrix defined in a clear way, have a list of all tasks for all teams in the same place, and make it easy rather than distributed on a bunch of spreadsheets to then track later on. And instead of having that bloated 300-page document bombarding people with too much, instead, what we're going to be doing is having a concise, trackable, clear set of accountable contracting. And that's the third step. In order to be able to do that, we have shared all of these parts in the camp guide. And this is what we'll go through in a demo. Everything from commenting to get to agreement and proposing and approving and going through a responsibility matrix, defining AI rules so that we don't have to learn complex languages, how to check certain properties, defining placeholders, a timeline, collaborating over when people are going to hand off work to each other. And then because you've got a bunch of different aspects in the same project, you want to be able to split these into what we call work packages and then have targeted contracts, not just in a human readable, but also in a machine readable way. And we want them to be smart so that they understand what's in them. And we want them to be e-signed so that teams are actually accountable and on the hook for them. Man, that's a lot. So let's jump into a demo, shall we? What do you think, guys?
Yeah, ready to go.
Cool. Okay.
Let's do this.
So if we look at where we left off last time, we had a project. Louis added a nice image to our project, and that was actually generated from our company templates. And if I go into our project, you can start to see we have teams assigned and team members, and we also have this concept of documents. Instead of Word documents that are disparate and not permissioned, we looked at how we can have multiple documents in the same place, have accountability, so we're assigning team members to act on these, and having these fields which are automatically driven from database fields as well. What we want to be able to do is get to an agreement of who is the right team to carry out this project. And there are a number of different parts to that puzzle. We looked at the pre-appointment BIM execution planning process and moving that into the appointment. So we actually have a contract BIM execution plan and analyzing risks and mobilizing a team. So I've just added, with 3 clicks of a button, from our company templates or from our standards, the way to analyze risk and mobilize a team and from all of our standards. We can even add in appointment language if we've got all of the information particulars, meaning where do we find all of the definitions for some of these things, and even all of this language from a protocol perspective. So what is the legal language? We can even add in all of this type of language as well into our contract. And what we end up with is a bunch of documents, really useful starting points that we can then go through and fill in. Yeah.
In the previous webinar, we covered all the permissions that went through all of that, the assignments and the approval workflow by sections. But yeah, this is super cool. Most teams spend many weeks trying to cover all this, and lots of time wasted because maybe these documents are in different locations with different permission levels because of security concerns of access of certain teams. Well, everything's managed here, but you can still manage the access to which teams can access certain documents, keeping everything in one place. So it makes it really clear and easy to act on.
Yep, absolutely. So there's a bunch of templates out of the box. You'll have your own templates to go through this and make sure that you're following a really structured workflow. But today's focus is going to be in the power of a database, not just in driving documents, but also in driving our understanding of what the scope is. And last time we built this set of mechanical requirements for our asset information model. We were focused from an owner's perspective of defining this list of what we really need, defining maybe things like the document requirements. Here we started to say what certificates we need, maybe some checklist items, maybe some description of it, maybe a cost that's associated with these things, and being able to see all of these pieces of the puzzle, not in a complex spreadsheet with hundreds of columns in multiple different places, not boring, not error prone, but actually in a database with this application layer on top of it, which makes it a lot easier to understand and manage. And that principle means that we can say, this is a document that's required, and I need this specific team to upload a document into this placeholder. And that's some of the stuff that we'll carry on in the tracking part. But what we also see is this concept of information requirements. On top of the geometry that we defined and the documentation that we needed, we wanted to also be able to define what information is required. So inside of here, I can now see, let me just turn off the document so you can just see the information. So inside of our HVAC equipment, it was an item that we brought in from our library last time. It actually also brought in some information requirements. And those information requirements, we can say whether they are or whether they are not required at certain points in time. And at the moment, it's for the asset information model. Inside of each one of these, we even have a rule that defines exactly what we want to check for these. So I would like a contact email along with the warranty start date, and I want this item to be barcoded in my digital twin, let's say. But I also maybe want to get specific on this. So rather than a verification rule just being any, we actually want to check whether it is an email format. And in order to do that, we can manage the global information requirements in our project in this information tab at the bottom. If I open up this tab, we can see that we have a nice grid setting them up. We can tag them so we can filter them. We can even bring in a bunch more from a library as well. And more on that, but let's focus on what we have. If you want to then define something specific for this contact email, I can manage these. And instead of saying any value, I'm going to potentially just pick one of these. But if I want to define it with a bit more specificity, I'm going to use the AI rule defining. And I'm going to say, I want this to be in an email format. And if I say generate this, yeah, okay. So we're saying that we need an @ symbol in the middle. We need something to end it with. I'm going to say, okay. And now we're going to check this format. You can change it if you want to. You can define any rule that you want to run that check. But now we're going to make sure that this is defined in an email format. If we want to add information requirements to other areas or to our project, I can also create them. So I'm going to start, maybe I would like more warranty-based data. And we're searching the Building Smart Data Dictionary and using the way of filtering. So I'm saying anything in this warranty property set, this P set, this group. I also want to understand whether it's got an extended warranty or not. And this brings in this line item. I can then define my rule. I could maybe make this into a date or a number so I can understand what maybe the value and then some units in here as well. But let's save this one. And now let me just add some of these to our other line items in here. So I'm going to assign these and you'll start to see them also being assigned under each one of these as well. I'm going to assign them to our heat pump. So we've got all of these and everything is also linked into the Building Smart Data Dictionary. So if I click this link, let me just click this link and then you can see where this goes to Building Smart with the definition of what an extended warranty is and where it's used, etc.
Whoa, this is super cool, isn't it? I mean, it's not just a powerful database, as you outlined in the beginning. It looks like an Excel sheet with some brain, actually. I think so. If I just quickly want to summarize and run through, responsibilities, information requirements, but also not only model-related activities, but we will also see some documents that we can manage in the same place. Also tied into AI, so to help us to create information requirements in a language that we don't have to speak, linking into Building Smart Data Dictionary as well. So it's a lot of content that we can put behind this nice looking user interface as well. And I think that your demonstration that you just showed us, it really shows how this can be set for scalability and repeatability. So now reusing this or building upon the scope that you just created is going to streamline the downstream processes quite a bit.
Yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned responsibility matrix there. So if we were to morph this towards a responsibility matrix over different milestones and start to include different deliveries, we could even start to add those here. So if I'm going to add maybe like a couple of milestones, and then if I update the names of these milestones to be, let's have one that's 3D coordination, and let's have one that is a cost estimate, and let's save both of these. I'm going to move the asset information model milestone to the end. So you'll see it move in the background as well. And now we've got a grid that we can start defining what the requirements are at an earlier stage and what requirements maybe change over time. And in order to do this quickly, I'm going to use the quick assign tools on the right-hand side. And I'm going to simply say, maybe for our 3D coordination, I would like to see the detailed elements and I would like to see them potentially in their proposed location so that I can coordinate with other teams. And maybe I'm going to take on the responsibility of modeling them early. I'm going to propose this to other team members and I'm going to simply add some of these just quickly by clicking and you can assign. And maybe I need some help on where these are. And maybe I only need, let's say, the symbolic representation for these fire dampers. So I can quickly assign these and I can start to say also whether I need the information requirements and the documentation. Let me turn on the information requirements and I could say, potentially I don't need them here, but maybe I do need these for our cost estimate. And maybe I only need a symbol but I do need to know maybe on the estimate, I just need a document. I could add a document requirement as a placeholder and start to define this. You can see how I'm building these up and how I might need certain geometry, certain information, certain requirements at certain times. And these milestones are completely flexible. We can group them into stages of a project, into phases of a project. We can add as many of these as we like. We can order them. We could change the dates. We can add descriptions and really detail out exactly what that definition of a project looks like for the assets that we defined from an owner's perspective early on. So lots going on there. And if I was to start to think about this project as not just for mechanical teams, but maybe we also need to have things like the architecture and structure and fire protection, etc. And if we've done that before, I can go to my library and I could use my company template. And then in our responsibility matrix, I could then say, I'm going to add the architectural scope, and I'm also going to add the structural scope. And now what we have done, I could have changed this and decided which milestones I wanted to bring in and what information and fields and be very selective over what I would like to bring in. But it looks like I have brought in all of these details for these requirements. And now I can understand even the teams. These teams have been automatically created for me. And then I can start to see, maybe put this into a responsibility matrix, a design responsibility matrix. And then I'm going to load these into this folder. And now we have one folder, design responsibility matrix, over these milestones. And maybe if I ordered these and said that the architecture is first, just architecture, structure, mechanical, and you can see all of these requirements that have been defined.
Yep, Clive, I'm approving some of the scope that you've proposed.
You're going to approve it. Okay, I can see you've approved some of this.
I approved it. So what we've just done is clearly defined some stages. He's grouped some of the assets inside of a responsibility matrix. And really, it's just been much more clear to jump in and see this. I personally have dealt with spreadsheets that were massive, and it was even hard to get the teams to just look at it because they didn't know what belonged to them right away. What this does is really clearly show who's responsible, what the uses are, design responsibility, what package could look like. And all of this just becomes much more clear for us to visually see. And we haven't even shown the power of some of these filters, which we'll get to soon.
Yeah, absolutely. So I can see that some of these things have been approved, and that's what Louis is doing, is going through and saying what the status is, and we can cover that in a little bit. But a project is not just about modeling. Most of the tasks are actually related to information exchange that is not an element or a model. And those go in the master information delivery plan. So we've got tasks from multiple team members that are modeling tasks, and we can see them here. You could describe and define this in any way that you want to, but maybe we want to also define the master information delivery plan according to ISO 19650, which is basically saying that we have tasks for each of these teams, and those tasks need to be exchanged either between teams or given to the owner, the appointing party, and making sure that we understand when that happens, making sure that when the handoff occurs, it's in the right form and format, etc. So I'm going to add the master information delivery plan as a table as well into our project. And you can see that we see things like the architecture and different milestones, we require certain things. In this example, I think we said that the 3D coordination was going to be a deliverable that was earlier, but in this, we might have the requirement for visualization, and we need a VR experience in a web VR format. We need JPEG 360 views. We need Unity 3D fire simulation VR. Wow, that's a lot. We need a 3D model. And at the moment it's saying I need a 3D model in Revit. Maybe I also need to have a 3D architecture model in an IFC file as well. And I'm going to assign that to the architect. So then I can add this and it becomes a requirement. This is a placeholder now so that teams can upload their models directly into here as well. And then the building design package maybe needs concept design, it's PDFs, there's IFCs, there's Excel, data sheets, PDF, etc. All of these are requirements that are assigned to these teams. And instead of having these in multiple places, in multiple spreadsheets, it really is more streamlined, more cohesive, and more unified for teams to understand when they're all in the same place and have this application layer over the database that makes it a lot easier for teams to use.
Right. Wow. So Yeah, if I want to recap a little bit, I think it's super cool because what we've seen on other projects, a typical problem was that the MIDP is just kind of floating document, not really connected to any milestones or definitely not connected to any CDs, which we will see a little bit later, how we can not only start requesting documentation and any kind of tasks and deliverables, but also later down the road, how you can start receiving these documents and see the progression, the completion of these documents and improve them as you go.
Yep, absolutely. One of the problems that I faced as a contractor when we were trying to either bid this out to multiple teams or when I was receiving documentation, it was always there was too much. It was always this tender document that would come through and it would be this huge slab of wad of paper. And we would joke about having to weigh that tender document when it came through as the contract, and saying if it was really heavy, then we would pad the price. We would add more money to that bid. And so having all of this in one place can be quite difficult. You know, you've got a lot of detail, a lot of information, a lot of requirements, everything in here. And so instead of just looking at it and managing it like this, we actually have something called work packages. We can create a work package, which will be a filtered view that can then be used in contracting, can then be used to just share it with others, and can really define a clearer, more targeted scope. So if I create a work package and I'm going to simply say that this is going to be the architecture, we're going to say that it's the architecture and the task information delivery plan. So we could define that and say, I don't want all folders. I want to just say, maybe I want the architectural and the architectural folders in here. So we're selecting the two hierarchies. And then maybe we want to just say that we want to have the 3D coordination milestone, and it's only for the architecture team. And we actually don't want to show the cost in here. We just want to show the documents, maybe the information requirements at the same time. We can add a description and then hit save. And what we do then is we've defined a filter. We've filtered just their scope here, and we can then see a much clearer view, a much easier way of describing and understanding what's required. And we can even send them a link. I can copy this link, it copies to the clipboard, and now I can go to another browser tab and I can just paste that in, or I could send that to a team, and now they just see this set of responsibilities. So it's really much more targeted, much clearer, much easier way of doing things. If I was to create another one and say, let's create this as a mechanical modeling scope. And here we would choose potentially the team. Let's say that's mechanical engineers tasks, and it's only the approved content. And we only want to show them the information requirements as an example. So now here it is. This is their team's work, and we can jump between them and understand each of these scopes really clearly. We can share a link. We can start permissioning this and start making it super easy for teams to understand.
Yep. So if you're not the expert who should be creating these packages, and this is perfect because now you can send me that link, and as the trade expert on my end, I can review this and give that feedback right away. And we haven't sent a PDF yet, just collaboratively looking at the scope and seeing what would be the best approach for this project without, having that formal e-signature yet or any of that workflow through PDFs, which could be overwhelming, especially when you're looking through a huge list of content. This is directly specific for my trade.
Yep, absolutely. And I think that's the benefit of having a structured process like ISO 19650, which basically says, let's not hide it all in a contract. Let's have a collaborative tender process, which brings the right people in, starts to evaluate to see whether they actually have capability and capacity through that pre and post appointment BIM execution planning process, and then bringing them in to understand the responsibility matrices and actually collaborating in an environment that is beneficial rather than it's trying to hide all of the bits into the contract somewhere. Is there a way to see a more compact view so we can see that as well? And we could even save that as part of the work package so that a team came in and this is what they would see. You really can understand all of this in a really clear way. Now we've got a set of requirements and we understand people's scope. We could ask them for input, not just on what the scope is, but also on what we call the timeline. And the timeline, if I switch from the grid view to the timeline view, we start to see these bars as representations. And I can see that we're jumping the gun, and I'm going to start adding some of these durations and things like that. Maybe you guys could also jump in and start to work on some of this. I'm going to just literally kind of move things around. I'm going to show you that these dependencies are actually really intelligent dependencies. They understand the start to finish, start, etc., lead, lag, whether they're active or not. And then drag and drop the timelines and start to define the durations of these tasks. Really start to go to town and start. You can see everyone else is working behind the scenes here and define whether it's the duration or whether it's a constraint type to say this must start on a certain point, it must finish on a certain point. We can only start this after this task and so on. And all of this is occurring in a collaborative way. We can even define teams and team members' responsibilities. So I could say this is Akosh, and maybe I can define this one as myself. Let me change the team just so that we can see. Oh, yeah. And we can start. Oh, actually, I changed the team and now it's filtered out of this view. So you can see the power of those abilities to be able to define these and manage these and understand how to package the work in a way that is useful.
Yeah, so the beautiful thing about it is that it's not just a timeline, not just a couple of bars in a presentation, but it's really have the same depth. So as you were clicking around on these tasks, you see that requirements are being linked to these tasks. Let it be document, let it be information requirement, checklists, all that kind of information and requirements are being recorded here together with the decision making, the activities that are occurring on the task. So it's really just another view of the same set of data, but the perfect view that we are most commonly using, the Gantt schedule, to really start adding durations, dependencies, starts and end days to these tasks.
Yep. Oh, so we've looked at a lot. We've defined. Let me jump back to the all scope and let me switch back to the grid view and let me turn it back to a full view here. So we've got different ways of looking at this data and cutting and slicing it, group it, define structure for it. So we mentioned these milestones, whether they are the use or the deliverable or a way of defining a date range. We can define these in single columns. We can group these and so on. When we've defined all of this in one big grid, we can also start to say, well, actually, I only want to see this part, or I just want to see the mechanical modeling scope, and we can hone in on this. And in using these, we can make it easier for teams to collaborate, but also we can make it easier for us to not overload that team that's bidding on the work with massive amounts of paperwork as well. So when we create an export or a contract, we can also use those filters. So if I was to create, if I go here and I go to export and I go to create a document, I'm going to create a PDF. And in my scope export, I could choose one of these work packages. If I wanted to, I could just say, I want to export the work package for the mechanical scope that's approved, for example. But in order to generate something even more powerful, we're going to choose a cover page as an example. And now I'm going to say, I want to see a detail page about the document. I want to see an index. So this is our details page. I want to see an index of all the different documents that are here. I want to actually produce a page that has the information, which is that got that image on and any other information about the project that we've added. I want a Teams page. So I want to actually add a directory of all of our team members. I don't want to have to format this and define it and clear it. And maybe I want to filter this for just certain teams. I then want to understand the exchange information requirements. And in this case, I'm going to include the BIM Execution Plan. If I go back to the start here, we can see that now the document index is updating for us. So we've got the project information, team directory, the exchange information requirements, and the BIM Execution Plan. Then I'm going to say I would like a grid of requirements as well to be added to this. So now we've got this scope grid. And if I go to the scope grid, you can see this is exactly what it looks like. Maybe I'd need the timeline as well. I want to see what the timeline looks like. And we can start to see this set of requirements. And maybe I don't want to see some of the tasks that are on other teams. Maybe this is just for the architecture team's tasks. And now it's filtered out for just those tasks that are important. And then I want a really detailed print because this is going to be part of the contract. And I want the information requirements backed up with a really clear legend about all of these things. And then I want to add appendices to this as well. And I want to get an approval from all of the team members or some of the team members. And I'm going to say, this is the contract. And I could be a lot more inventive with this. But right now, it's creating me a PDF. And instead of me having to go through all of that pain and heartache and formatting in order to be able to create this, I've actually just created it in a couple of clicks, and it's all indexed, it's all hyperlinked, it's all really clearly, nicely defined. Everything that we see in the grid, for example, let's go to some of the, it's filtered for the architecture's tasks. I can see the detailed requirements. It's all hyperlinked. So if I click on a link, I can see these are the information requirements in more detail, down to the work packages, down to the document requirements, and we can get a signature on this as well. All of these other documents in here are placeholders. We're going to dig into the CDE side and filters and assignments and approvals later on. But if we were to say, let's see this one at the moment, we can see this is the one that we want to review and sign. In order to get a signature, I am going to start this off, and I could write my name. I could also sign my name like so. I'm going to adopt and sign that. And now we can start to see. So I can see Louis approved it. I've approved it. Akash is in review at the moment. But I can then, as that contract is being approved, we get the whole golden thread. We can also see signatures and everything all signed off on our cover page.
So seeing it from Clive's end as the one producing the contract, all that data he was able to just select and say, I want a grid, I want the BEP to be included, I want to filter for this. But on the receiving end, man, it makes it so much easier to just see what's relevant to me. He was able to filter for just the architectural scope. This is my contract. I know this is me signing for this specific scope of work, not having any overlapping scope or being worried that I've signed for too much, because I know that this was targeted for me. And also being on the receiving end to look at this in Plannerly in the scope view and be able to filter for anything without having to skim through that PDF. The PDF, yes, is formal. It's what our management, our lawyers need, right, to sign off on agreements. But ultimately, if I can use something that's very dynamic and very easy to use visually and go through and search for my scope of work, which I know is tied back to the contract, makes it so much easier for me to just go back and forth and be more confident in the scope that I just signed off on.
In addition to the scope in a human readable form, what we're going to show you is how machine readable scopes even more important sometimes to streamline that workflow. So if we were to e-sign a PDF, well, wouldn't it be cool if we could create an IDS, an information delivery specification, and also sign that document as well? So let's see whether we can do that. We would create an IDS specification. I can simply give it a title, or let me just leave it blank and it will fill it in for me. I won't go into the details of this, but it's created me this. It's that instant, and it's now generated me this machine readable form. And you can see these are the rules that we set up for the email format, and everything is defined. We can then get an approval on this, and I can say, I want to select some signatories. I want Akash's signature, or I want Louis, I want everyone's, and then save. And then that goes out. It sends them an email, and we can go through this process of reviewing and signing this. So imagine if you're not just restricted to PDFs and getting a signature on PDFs, but what if you're able to get signatures on an information delivery specification as well?
When you created an IDS, it was so quick and instant. It's really important for me sitting in a region. OpenBIM and Building Smart and IDS is really relevant. And I believe it's a great vehicle. It's a great way to communicate the needs in a machine readable format, so we don't have to recreate things. But I also see a broken process, because in many cases, it's an additional step, an additional tool to create an IDS and absolutely detached from the contracts. But now, as you just demonstrated, it's absolutely part, and it's just another view, again, on the same set of data. It's a nice and human readable version that experts can agree on and communicate over. It's now machine readable format of that. And it would be interesting to see how the workflow continues in authoring tools like Revit or Archicad. And yeah, it absolutely does. So we have a couple of case studies about those on our website. So probably I will post or put in some links where you can follow up on those workflows as well.
Yeah, there's an Excel export option is also available, and Revit plugins that help import that information back into Revit elements. Yeah, many options that you can do with this information.
Very cool. Okay, so we ran through a bunch of stuff in the demo, but we're here now. What? So, okay, you're fixing all these broken things. We're really serious about trying to make this easier and making sure that it's for the whole entire team. And this is up to you whether you want to join in or not, but we beckon you, download the camp guide. It's a cheat sheet. It's completely legal and completely free, and it's actually useful. So download the camp guide. We'll put that in as a link. But this is your challenge. So we want to get you involved, and we're throwing down the gauntlet. You can create a free account. If you didn't know already, you can go to plannerly.com and hit the join free button. And then you can access a free account. You can start to play around with it. And we want you to create something using these new fields and create something smart, create something weird. We're totally open-minded. Use the custom fields in any way you want to. And then if you could show an example of that, an email, either a video or an image, or invite hello@plannerly.com to your project. And we will evaluate those and present a winner as part of this camp series. And when I refer to this, when I look at this, let me go to an example. We don't just have the model responsibility matrix with all of these different things from mechanical and structural and etc. But we also have, as we saw, master information delivery planning with all of these tasks and the 3D model requirements and the work packages and things like that. So if we show these are the requirements from a placeholder, from a container perspective, and trying to understand what documents. But also think about project setup tasks, whether it's kicking a project off and appointing an information manager and setting up a common data environment and understanding what the requirements are, what the checklists are. But in addition to that, this is the tasks side of things, the fields. You can create as many custom fields with data types to your heart's content. And these could be pick lists and a whole bunch of other things. An example of using that is this risk schedule, where you've got technical risks that are evaluated at different stages. And we can see model accuracy issues with a risk level and a risk likelihood. And these are all drop downs that have been created using the managed task fields. And you can add anything you want in here. If I look at one of these, for example, the risk levels, you can see that we've got a pick list with lots of different options and color coded and a whole bunch of things in here. All of this is completely customizable. You can define which of these fields are shown in each folder, in each row, and even on each task. So go to town on that. That is your challenge. Send us a screenshot of what you're doing. We'd love to see all of the crazy, weird, wacky ways that you're putting these together.
Right. So the beautiful thing is, if I just go back a second for what you just mentioned. So if you have a risk register to start with, that's a beautiful thing. I think it's a great tool in project management in general, especially if you can present that to your customer before the appointment, the contracting would occur. It builds trust in the entire project. And of course, you will see what the problems might be and how you are going to mitigate that. So we also have a template that you can see on the screen right now. So this is how a risk register might look like if you use this kind of approach. But the challenges, and if you don't have this kind of text-based risk register, don't even get started with that, because linking these risks to certain tasks and mitigating them where they actually occur during the project execution is a huge benefit. And of course, you will be able to control your project execution much better if you register these potential risks along the way.
Yep, perfect. Okay, wow. What are people doing with Plannerly? Well, there are over 100,000 teams that are using Plannerly on their projects. And actually, Resource shared a case study about VDC and how their team actually grew 5 times and they were 60% faster with workflows they were creating. And they save 75% in the document preparation time. It's a lovely case study. And we've got so many more of them. I love the fact that they talk about, moving from 5 tools into one platform, clear ownership expectations. These are really powerful case studies to see what other teams are doing around the world. We also had a case study with Mezgo. Before, they were using spreadsheets to manage all of these tasks, and this is something we'll go into in the tracking next. But what they moved from spreadsheets into using Plannerly to do was to actually make it more autonomous. So instead of creating a set of requirements in a spreadsheet, letting teams go off and bumble about and trying to adhere to the requirements, and then getting the set of deliverables back, then creating a spreadsheet or a set of issues, a set of problems, and then the team resolving them. None of that happened. They actually put the detailed requirements in the team's hands, and they started to autonomously resolve the issues. So 80% of those did not even come up. And these types of changes are just immensely powerful. This is such a step change, such a massive difference between our traditional approach of send me your deliverable, I'll tell you what's wrong with it. This is about being proactive and going through this process using machine readable sets of information. If you want to learn more about how to use BIM information management, ISO 19650, some of Plannerly as well, we have a certified information manager course. Hopefully a lot of you guys are also already involved in this. It starts from basics and understanding BIM, advanced workflows and starting to connect these dots together, an introduction to ISO 19650 for individuals, and then even a gap analysis that supports your certification readiness process for getting certified. And we have this digital troublemaker course, which is the culmination of all of these experiences and saying, it's not just about implementing technology. It's actually a human and people process. And it's something that really is quite powerful when you understand this change management and try to support teams in it rather than just push technology for technology's sake. They're all free of charge. Yes, they're all free of charge. They're all available on that site, plannerly.com/training. If you're interested in joining our network of partners around the world, maybe you're a small team, maybe you're a university that's teaching BIM, then we provide a whole bunch of stuff. You can get streamlined workflows, co-marketing opportunities. We refer people to you, clients to you, real business growth. If you're curious about becoming a partner, then book a 20-minute call with us. The link is there, plannerly.com/meeting.
Yeah, we give out licenses for universities, programs out there with students, and contact us and we'll hook you up.
Yep. So we're regular folk. We're real people trying to make BIM and information management more useful. You can connect with us on our profiles. These are links to our LinkedIn profiles. And we also have a really nice group which is forming. There are over 1,500 people in this group now that are information managers that are really trying to do great things and improve our industry. So scan the QR code here and join the group. Join us there. Okay, we had orientation. 2 was the planning. And we talked about how you can build this really detailed set of requirements, but it's about communicating and making sure that people understand what's in their contract, making sure you're not just trying to bury information into their contract and their requirements. And so that it's a collaborative agreement rather than actually just a contract. Collaborative agreements is where the future is. Next, we're going to be talking about how to set up your CDE, how to understand metadata, how to start collecting and tracking those deliverables. And it's all about tracking, all about making sure that we can get that into a process that gets achieved rather than teams are confused and not delivering what they need to. If you could just take one thing back to your team tomorrow, what would it be? That would be really interesting to hear. What are you most looking forward to in the tracking session next or the final episode? We will get into the auto verification of models as well. We really appreciate your input. Thanks for joining, Camp.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks for joining.